Hello, reading again from Jung's Psychological Types. We're going to be looking today at his short definition of thinking. Thinking. This I regard as one of the four basic psychological functions. Thinking is that psychological function which, in accordance with its own laws, brings given presentations into conceptual connection. It is an apperceptive activity, and as such must be differentiated into active and passing thought activity. Active thinking is an act of the will. Passive thinking is an occurrence. In the former case, I submit the representation to a deliberate act of judgment. In the latter case, conceptual connections establish themselves, and judgments are formed which may even contradict my aim. They may lack harmony with my conscious objective. Hence, also for me, any feeling of direction, although by an act of active apperception, I may subsequently come to a recognition of their directedness. Active thinking would correspond therefore with my idea of directed thinking. Passive thinking was inadequately characterized in my previous work as fantasying, and fantasying is spelt with a PH, not an F. We'll learn about fantasies, PH fantasies, at some point as well. Today I would term it intuitive thinking. To my mind, a simple stringing together of representations, such as is described by certain psychologists as associative thinking, is not thinking at all but mere presentation. The term thinking should, in my view, be confined to the linking up of representations by means of a concept, where, in other words, an act of judgment prevails, whether such act be the product of one's intention or not. Okay, so thinking is the linking up of ideas or the linking up of representations by means of a concept. Okay, so thinking is like there's an overarching concept somewhere, and then the thinker is linking up representations by means of a concept. So you can't, okay, so if you're linking up ideas to fit into a concept, that concept must already exist, one, but you also must understand how you already judge that concept in order to kind of fit the ideas in a tailor-made way. So therefore it's a judging function. This is very complicated. The faculty of directed thinking I term intellect. Okay, he's given us lots of information here. So the directed thinking, the deliberate, I am going to now think in words about what I'm going to have for my breakfast. He also deems that the intellect. Yeah, so see, my thinking here is very primitive. From what I just said, I'm thinking, so me just thinking about what to have for breakfast is intellect according to Jung, but somebody who is a thinking lead wouldn't just be thinking, they wouldn't just be using their thinking for very simple things like that. They would be using their thinking for very complicated things, like the thing that I use my either intuition or feeling or possibly both for, you know, my and again my thinking, I mean, it doesn't mean that I can't come to those same conclusions or the same ability to judge. It's just that I'm not using my thinking for very complex things. Thinking about what I want for my breakfast is quite a tiring act. The directed thinking thing. Thinking about what to do with my day by using thinking, okay, so I should do this, I should do that, rather than actually sitting here and imagining how I would feel in different scenarios and then choosing the best feeling one, or the one that feels the most like me, like the most authentic idea. If I try and do that with thinking, it's not, well, I find the process very tiring. It's like I'm using a lot of mental energy to do that. But Jung's calling it the intellect. So if you are a thinking Dom, then it'll be a highly utilized function. You'd add the practice, it will appear as intellect. The faculty or passive or undirected thinking I term intellectual intuition. So intellectual intuition, yeah, that's maybe where I'm putting two and two together in the background over, for example, a subject like health. So I may have read a bunch of health articles, and then there's something ticking away in the background, and then all of a sudden it pops into my mind, oh, it might be a good idea. Yeah, no, it wouldn't say it like that though. It would pop into my mind. I'd get the impression that I should start eating a particular food because of things that I've read. Or I might be talking to somebody about health and then it suddenly dawns on me and I say it out loud for the first time. Like, oh yeah, actually I do think from the reading that I've been doing, it looks like this food is going to be the healthiest thing for me to eat. And I kind of wouldn't have come to that unless I'd been talking to that person. Might not be this, it's just some ideas that are popping into my head. Furthermore, I describe directed thinking or intellect as the rational function, since it arranges the representations under concept in accordance with the presuppositions of my conscious rational norm. Undirected thinking or intellectual intuition, on the contrary, is, in my view, an irrational function, since it criticizes and arranges the representations according to norms that are unconscious to me and consequently not appreciated as reasonable. So that could be something to do with unconscious belief systems. And then unconsciously the person is thinking into those faulty belief systems, or just belief systems that are not faulty but unconscious belief systems in general. And then there's thinking happening subconsciously in passive thinking. So is he saying you can't think passively about rational concepts? In certain cases, however, I may recognize subsequently that the intuitive act of judgment also corresponds with reason, although it has come about in a way that appears irrational to me. Yeah, so the thinker might recognize that his intuitive acts of judgment, i.e., his unconscious belief system, although it corresponds with reason, it's still irrational because of the way it came about. Because he can't question it. So he recognizes a difference between subjecting his unconscious belief systems to the usual logic or rational thought that he subjects concrete concepts too. So he's recognizing it as a form of thinking because it is subject to certain laws, but he's also recognizing that these beliefs may be irrational because of the way it came about. Maybe this is saying that thinkers, they have a really good ability to question their own belief systems because they know what active judgment feels like because they use it a lot. They know that, okay, well, this is a different form of it, so therefore let's really break it down and question it. I don't know, because there's this kind of, I feel like there's a general belief that, feeling types are the ones who become better people. Because, we always want to do better. We always want to question ourselves. We always want to question our motives because we want to be better. But at the same time, your psyche is not going to allow you to do anything that you're not ready for. So, you'll go so far with it, but then you're going to be like, oh no, that's too much. I'm not going to go there. And you'll rationalize that bit away, create a bit of a wall. It's like you're your own gatekeeper because it's too dangerous, And I guess that would happen to thinking types too. But to what extent compared to feelers? So reading this, thinking types are equally as capable of, self-reflection. It's done in a different way, but there's no reason for it to not be as deep as a feeling person, or that they wouldn't have the desire to do that. Thinking that is regulated by feeling I do not regard as intuitive thinking, but as thought dependent upon feeling. It does not follow its own logical principle, but is subordinated to the principle of feeling. In such thinking, the laws of logic are only ostensibly present. In reality, they are suspended in favour of the aims of feeling. Okay, so he's making the distinction between intuitive thinking or passive thinking and thinking that is currently being regulated by feeling. Okay, so those two things are different. It's hard for me to try and imagine. Yes, you might be actively thinking this, and then this, and then this, and then feeling goes, no, just, you're not ready for that. So it can come in and regulate. It's not like the thinker's just going to think himself into impossible situations. But I think, so that would be a thinking Dom. Or that might be an argument against what I just said about passive thinking. So if the thinker is detecting old or unconscious belief systems need to be put to the test of rigorous logic, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to do that, because his feeling can kick in and go, nope, that doesn't feel very nice, or it doesn't feel like the right thing to do. Let's just leave that where it is for now. So again, it's like the gatekeeping within the psyche. Okay, so thinkers are still regulated by feeling, right? And the feeling will be unconscious, okay? So if a feeler, that's their most conscious function, okay? There's feeling, and then there's meta feeling, and then there's meta feeling. It's like you have the feeling, but then it's subject to, how do you feel about the feeling? It's like you can zone out or move away more and more. So it's fractal, it works very well. It's it's not like the feeling type is just going to run away with their own feelings on things, because of the way it works, that the way the meta feeling works, there's always no, running away with yourself is not right. It's almost like levels of authority in a sense. So that's a feeling Dom whose feeling works really well. The thinking Dom, their feeling is at, well, you could say the opposite end of the spectrum. So it's very unconscious, which means it's going to move and behave in a way that isn't subject to any conscious authority, you could say. So if the thinking Dom's thinking is running away with them, and you're about to enter dangerous territory, dangerous psyche-breaking territory, okay? The feeling is going to come and pull the thinking back in. No, you've gone too far with that. Let's keep it balanced. That feeling isn't acting in subject to all these layers of meta feeling, okay? Because it's very conscious. That the thinking type's feeling function is very unconscious. So where people say, oh, it's so irrational to be dominated by feeling, like just, you're always listening to your feelings or, your belief on things, whatever it is. Actually, an unconscious feeling function, you could argue that, well, that is the most irrational way of using feeling, and that would be in the thinking Dom. The feeling function in a thinking person is necessarily unconscious. If it were conscious all the time, you would have a very conscious thinking function that would take you, very far, and then the feeling would kick in and pull the thinking function down. But instead of by some irrational means, it would pull the thinking function away from what it was doing. But if the feeling was also conscious, it would then meta feel over whether that was the right decision. So it would question itself. It's almost like the conscious functions are kind of self-regulating in a way. And you'd get either a fight between the thinking or feeling, or you get this constant, huge push and pull thing going on. That I guess it would eventually level out, and you'd have highly developed thinking, highly developed feeling, or you'd have not very well developed between the two. I don't know, who knows where that could go. So to have a conscious judging function trying to regulate the most conscious judgment function, it wouldn't work very well to quickly pull this back when it needs, because it would question itself too much. So it wouldn't be very effective, is what I'm trying to say there. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a lot of food for thought. I'll go away and do some active thinking on all of that. I won't really. I'll go away and visually imagine things in categories and link together, and if it feels right to me or if something feels off. It's all very interesting. All right, thanks for listening. See you next time.